A Superman action figure in a toy coffin, a blue shirt and red jacket, a first flight in the sun above the Arctic tundra. These are some of the moments that define my Superman fandom. Together on this podcast, we journey across time and media to examine, discover, and reconsider the creative visions that have shaped the Man of Steel. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. This is part 2 of Crisis Til Death, an 8-part weekly event. Last week, we took a look at John Byrne's work on the main Superman title. This week, we're going to be taking a look at Action Comics and Adventures of Superman during that same period of time. I'm joined for this episode by returning guest Bernie Gerstmayr. You might recall that Bernie joined me to discuss Superman in the Bronze Age a few episodes ago, and he's back for this episode as well. This is essentially a conversation in 2 parts, so I decided to sort of bifurcate it. For the first half of this episode, you will hear Bernie and I talk about John Byrne's work on Action Comics, which essentially functioned as a team-up title during that period of time. And then in the second half of this episode, Bernie and I turn our attention to Adventures of Superman, initially written by Marv Wolfman, drawn by Jerry Ordway, and then eventually co-plotted by Byrne and Ordway, and again with art by Jerry Ordway. You'll hear in this episode that Adventures of Superman really was somewhat of an unexpected delight for me as a reader during this reading project. I enjoyed the reading project for the most part overall, but Adventures of Superman was really a standout for reasons that you'll hear discussed shortly. So without further ado, here is the first part of my conversation with Bernie. Bernie, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So we are here to discuss the John Byrne run on Action Comics, issues 584 through 600. I have some thoughts. My feelings towards these action issues are a bit different than my feelings towards the Superman issues that I talked about with Dan Greenfield, and we'll get into all of that. But you know, as always, I want to toss it to you, and I want to get your overall impression. What was it like? Because I know you've read this stuff before, so what was it like going back? How did it hold up? What were your overall impressions of Byrne's work on Action Comics?
It was fun because I vividly remember having a few of these issues growing up. So in our last podcast, we talked about like when I got to go to the hardware store, and that was like, okay, Bernie, go pick out a book with your brother, and then, you know, just keep yourself busy while I'm go buying a Sawzall or whatever my dad was doing. But I specifically remember and going through, I used the trades. I don't know what you read out of, but I specifically have, there's the Man of Steel trades that they did 9 volumes of. The hard thing was they combined all of them kind of together at the same time because some of them connect story-wise. But Action, I vividly remember some of the covers because similar to what we talked about with DC Comics Presents, every issue was Superman and it was a specific character. So you got Superman and Checkmate. You got Superman and the Metal Men. And I personally loved that growing up because it was very clear who the story was going to be about. It was very clear what you were going to get. When you saw it on the spinner rack, you're like, oh, cool, this one's Booster Gold. And, you know, in some cases, that's as far as the coolness went. In other cases, we found some really great stories that were either good standalone stories or what we now start seeing in the Superman universe is cross-continuity. So they're forcing you to purchase Action Comics, Adventures, and possibly Superman. So you're definitely getting 3 books a month. But that was my first take. Was it was cool to see ones and dones, but then they also started doing good New Gods crossover stories with Adventures. I believe there were a few maybe a Booster Gold one that was 2 issues. And then, of course, Action Comics 600, which I have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, I think, that were just kind of neat touch-upon stories that we could talk about. So
cool. I'm glad to hear that, you know, you overall had a good experience with these. Yeah, I was less enamored. I mean, to your point, you know, Action during this period, you know, it functioned as a team-up title. So like you said, every issue was Superman teaming up with, you know, the Spectre, the Phantom Stranger, Booster Gold, the New Teen Titans, and so on. And they were, like you said, primarily, you know, self-contained stories. There were, a few two-parters. There were a few issues that tied in with another series. For example, one of the issues of action leads right into an issue of Booster Gold by Dan Jurgens. That being said, I read this the same way I read the Superman issues and the same way I read the Adventures issues, like really in a vacuum, essentially. I was not reading them in publication order. I read each title on its own, and with a few exceptions. But for the most part, I found that they read just fine. I guess for me, and I don't know that this is even so much a criticism. I think that action served its function well. It lived up to its title. There was a lot of action. These were very action-packed issues. At the same end, it also, by being a team-up book, it allowed Byrne and DC generally to, introduce all of us to the post-crisis versions of a lot of these characters, and to use Superman as the vehicle for that. So you get to get a sense of Superman's place in the DC universe, and you get to meet the post-crisis versions of a lot of these characters, even though, again, like a lot of them had their own titles and everything. So, I mean, if that's the function, to be an action-packed team-up book that introduces you to the DC universe, it succeeds. I guess for myself personally, I far more responded to the Superman issues because that was where we spent more time in Clark's head. That's where we spent more time with the supporting cast. So for these stories, I just didn't feel like there was much meat on the bone, to really sink my teeth into. And so I didn't hate the reading experience, but I just wasn't that enthralled with them. They were just sort of okay for me.
Yeah. Differing from talking about the Bronze Age, I feel like they had a lot of notes on one issue, but then I'm reading these and I was like, I have 3 things to say and that's all. Like there wasn't a ton, I had a few things over the course of how many issues was it? So I guess it was 84 to 600. So I mean, it's 14 issues. It's a lot of issues. How do you want to break things down? How do you want to look at them? You want to look at the standouts, like what were like kind of important moments, special things?
I'll be perfectly honest. I'm game to take any approach. There were really only a couple of stories where I really had strong opinions on. Specifically the Mr. Miracle Big Barda 2-parter and the issue where Lois goes to Smallville. Those are the ones where I really had the most thoughts. But other than that, I mean, I'm happy to kind of go in any direction. I mean, I guess what were the stories that stood out the most to you, either positively or negatively? Like what were the real standouts?
Like you just said, the positive ones were the Big Barda Mr. Miracle. I have a lot of notes on that actually.
Those were positive?
No, I kind of thought they stood out because it was different. I thought it was the first time we're seeing something this way. It was positive in a sense that I had lots to talk about. There's a lot of weird stuff, though, in this one that I don't think those 2 books would be written today for various reasons.
No. All right. Let's start with these 2 issues because I think, it's funny because I've read about this 2-parter many times over the years, but this was the first time that I actually read the story. For anyone who's not familiar or needs a little refresher, Big Barda is kidnapped and mind controlled by this cast out from Apocalypse named Sleaze, who lives in the sewer. And he uses his mind control to force her to make these pornographic movies, and eventually takes control of Superman and is about to have the 2 of them make a movie together when Mr. Miracle intervenes. So it's a story that I know has been written about a lot. I mean, there's definitely a very heavy ick factor across these 2 issues. And I agree with you totally. I don't think this is something that would be written today. I mean, rightfully so. It just really leaves you with a pretty sick sense, was my experience reading it.
Yeah. I felt like, I don't want to say they did a good job of leaving things to your imagination, but I was surprised as I'm reading it going like, oh, that's the direction. I'm very surprised that DC even signed off. I mean, again, we're still talking, I think it's 88, maybe late 87.
Yeah. Around that time.
It still seems like we're in a modern time that I was kind of surprised DC would sign off like, hey, like there's this alien that's from Apocalypse that's got kind of a cool side business going on with a porn shop. I'm like, that's a weird Superman story arc to sell to publishers. So I'm kind of surprised that even happened. as I was reading it, did you get this weird sense? Did you read Spawn ever?
No.
There's the Sleaze character reminded me a lot of Clown, who is this demonic little creature that is from hell that is always kind of taunting the main character and kidnapping people and killing them and taunting them. But it had that really sick, creepy vibe. But this takes it to like an even more, like you said, icky factor. I also feel like it closes up really quick. Like there's this stuff going on, and then it's like, boom, like you're just taking care of it's done. And it wasn't even really addressed like the moral. There wasn't a moral of the story kind of ending that disturbed me a little bit. It was more like, oh, everything's okay. And well, we don't know where Sleaze went, but I don't feel like they talked about that enough, even in a sidebar.
I agree with you. And, lest anyone think that, we're unfairly judging an older story by today's standards. I mean, I feel like, and I can't answer this, right? I didn't read it at the time, but I feel like even if I did, I feel like it would leave a really poor taste in my mouth. And in part for what you said, that, if there was more of a point to it, I think it would be a little bit more palatable maybe. But, there's a lot that is implied. I mean, first of all, we find out that Barda's been under his control for 2 days, long enough for them to produce movies that are sold. Yeah. And, at one point, Sleaze approaches her and like starts to touch her, and she's like, no, not again. I mean, really implying like bad stuff going on. And it's the sort of thing that maybe there's a story subsequent to this that explored, her reaction to this. I'm not aware of one.
I don't think so.
And I think that's the sort of thing. It's like, if there's at least something meaningful that comes out of it, but it really seems like she's just victimized and then it's just forgotten about.
Yeah. I read it at night, and then the next day went back to it. Was like, am I missing something? And I kind of skimmed through. I was like, no, that's really dark. And again, very out of character for even what was going on both sides, but before and after those issues. I'm happy to like now just let it rest and go, okay, that was really icky. Let's move on to better things.
Yeah, I guess I'm glad that I read it, because like I said, I mean, I've read articles about it, I mean, the whole thing, it's the story where Superman and Big Barda almost make a porno. I mean, like that's the story. So, I guess I'm glad that I finally actually read the material itself. And I don't mean to make light of any of this, but there was an aspect to the story. I mean, that was gross. But there was an aspect of the story that I was like just scratching my head, and it really, you talk about suspension of disbelief. This just shattered that, where, Barda's missing. Mr. Miracle comes home. Darkseid is sitting on a chair in the
Isn't he reading
room
a paper?
he's got like a glass of wine, and he's got one of these VHS tapes featuring Barda, and he explains that like his agents, like, I don't know what these agents do. Like they keep abreast of the latest porn releases and they share them with Darkseid. I mean, it made no sense.
Well, and okay, was it? I don't know if it's this issue. I feel like there's another Mr. Miracle in our run. Was there? Yeah, the New Gods. I feel like at a certain point it's neat because we do get a little bit of like the quick, where did Mr. Miracle come from? Like, who is he? What's his backstory kind of deal? I mean, clearly there's a history on Apocalypse that he was supposed to be kind of one of their head henchmen, but then was torn away because he wanted to escape. I guess somehow another person, I think on Earth through a portal, pulled him back, taught him all this escape stuff. For listeners, Big Barda, she's one of the Furies. She's like Lashina. She's basically Granny Goodness's, again, woman team of just destroyers. So I did understand that Darkseid was kind of like pissed, like, hey, just a heads up, you should know about this. This is not okay. She's one of ours. Make this right. It was weird though, how it was just so colloquial. Like Darkseid really just sitting on the couch, or I think it was a recliner. I think he was sitting in the recliner. But that was odd to me, and it was odd at first, like, oh, Darkseid's kind of, I don't think nice is the right word, but he's going, hey, like, do you know what's going on here? And like but then I'm going, oh, and then it's also weird he's just hanging out in Scott Free's house. But yeah, it's just, I'll be honest, Anthony, it's an odd story. Like I don't understand why it was needed.
Yeah, I don't. I was. It. I know. It just felt off and out of place. And even Sleaze's whole plan. I mean, so he's
Yeah.
running this porn business. He references like raising enough money to build an army, presumably to try to return to Apocalypse, where he's been cast out for. It's like what? None of this really tracked. It did make me think of. I don't know if you ever watched the HBO series The Deuce.
Oh no.
But it was very reminiscent of that. It's a David Simon show created The Wire, and it's a recent show. It ran for 3 seasons, and it's all about prostitution and the rise of porn in New York City in the 70s and 80s. But it had I felt very much like I was back in that world, but not in a good way. But yeah, so that was a story that stood out. I mean, not for the right reasons, but yeah, just a lot of odd choices in that one.
Well, and I think we might have talked, was it earlier this week? And I feel like you were reading Action.
Mm-hmm.
And was that where you were going like, this is kind of a hard sell right now. It's hard to push through these. Adventures is better. We'll talk about that. But yeah, the actions, let me look. So the actions that stood out to me were the demon issue. The booster gold for a few interesting reasons. And really a dash of Checkmate and a lot of Action 600. But that's about all I got, man. Out of 14 issues, that's not saying a lot. Or 16 issues.
Yeah, and we skipped one. There's one issue that is part of a crossover that involves Legion, and it involves the Pocket Universe Superboy. And I have plans for that down the line, so we skipped that. But otherwise, yeah, so about 16 or so issues. Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to what I was saying before, I found these stories to be primarily plot driven. There really wasn't much in the way of character development. And I don't know, unless I was missing something, I didn't really feel like there was much insight into these characters or dynamics in much of these issues. Because again, you can use a team up story to, reveal something about the characters, the way they interact. And I didn't really get that in most of these issues. And so it really just came down to the plots, and they were fine. I mean, the first issue of this run is with the Teen Titans. Superman seemingly has, I'm just laying this out just to give people an example of like one of the issues that I'm talking about. But Superman seemingly has gone rogue. He's tearing up Metropolis. The new Teen Titans, first with Cyborg and then with the others, intervene. And ultimately we find out that there is this paralyzed man who has tricked Superman, lured him into a trap, and used the device to switch bodies with him. And he's drunk with power, and he's destroying the city. And eventually, of course, Superman is able to get back into his real body. There was a moral to that story, because Superman, really impresses upon this guy, like, look, you weren't quote unquote handicapped because of your physical, disability, but rather because of your mind, your spirit, the way you use these powers when you had the opportunity. So there was at least a lesson there. But I mean, that was the issue. It's quote unquote Superman destroying the city. Titans try to stop him, switch bodies. It was fine, but it just wasn't. Yeah. I didn't find it particularly interesting. So that's just like one example, I guess. Well,
and keep in mind too, and as people are reading these, if you're going back and reading these trades or doing a dive into this era, we got John Byrne writing 2 books a month. Okay, so Superman, which you're already talking about, also. He did plot and art. All right. Now in Action, he did plot, and then I think Dick Giordano did the pencils, right?
No, he inked it, but Byrne penciled it.
Oh, Byrne did. That's right. Byrne did do everything. So
yeah, no, he's writing and drawing 2 monthly books. Yeah, no, yeah.
And I hate to be this way, but anytime I've seen that happen, one of them suffers. One of them is done quicker. One of them has less meat.
Yeah. So, but again, I really want to be clear with this. And for people who love this run, that's great, right on. And the thing is, I think for what it seems like it was intended to do, I think it did it well. I guess I just wasn't that interested in what it was, what it was about.
Yeah. I went going in with low expectations because I knew mostly they were one-shot stories. The cool thing, like I said earlier, were we get to see some characters we don't always get to see interact with Superman. Some of them were better than others. When I got to the demon issue, I want to talk about that just for a second. So if you compare the pacing of some of the Bronze Age stories and the pacing of John Byrne's stories, a lot happens quickly. So that what I noticed right away in The Demon, it was like a really good example of storytelling, how it just moves. Like a lot is happening. There's kind of cool instruction in dialogue boxes or thought bubbles and that kind of stuff that move the story along. We see Morgan Le Fay come back into the mix. So again, I just noticed the pacing of that book was the first, like, oh, okay, like a lot is happening quickly. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot much to talk about.
Yeah, I don't know if the best compliment is like, it was really quick.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I hate to be this way, but like, I feel like there are some comics that I read that I don't want to think too much. I want to have a 15-minute like flip through. Ooh, that's some really cool art. Oh, that's a great big splash panel. I love seeing that character again. I don't need a huge deep dive Shakespearean approach to Superman. I just need a book before I fall asleep.
Listen, I hear you, and I'll be honest. Unless we were going to get different stories, but if these were the stories that we're working with, it's like, yeah, it would have really been a slog if they were very dense. So they were well paced. I will give them that. And here's the other thing too. I think you're talking about a team up book. Your mileage will vary depending on the characters selected and your affinity for them or otherwise.
Right.
For myself, I'm not the biggest Etrigan fan. I've never been. Mm-hmm. I don't much care for the Phantom Stranger. I don't like Silver Banshee. There were a number. I've never been able to get into the Metal Men. So that
I was just gonna ask, and I didn't want to offend anybody listening, but I'm like, I want somebody to come up to me and tell me they're a Metal Men fan, because I can't find any. I can't get into it. I've tried. I hate the whole concept, and it always comes off as campy and boring to me. I don't get it. Like, they're men and they're metal. Like, okay.
That's the thing. And yeah, I know it's funny. Similarly, and I've spent a lot of time in comic shops. I've never talked to anyone who's like, I love the Metal Men. I hope there are those. Listen, I hope there are those fans out there, because otherwise, what the hell are we doing with these Metal Men issues?
Yeah, how? And they're an old commodity. They're not new to this era. They've been around, I think, since late 60s, early 70s. The only somewhat funny / creepy part of the Metal Men is when is Platinum, or the girl Tina?
Yeah,
I think that's one. Her weird, like, always hitting on Doc Magnus. And then, like, even John Byrne draws her, like, super slinky. And I'm like, oh, no, thanks. It's just odd. Like, I found myself kind of somewhat cheering when some of them seemed to be exploded and gone. I was like, oh, Tin is gone. Great. One less Metal Man. Like, so.
I'll admit, I just got to the point where I was like, I don't care enough to try to learn who these characters are and keep them straight.
Yeah.
So I didn't even bother. But again, so that's an example where, that was another roadblock to my enjoyment, was I wasn't so into all. Now, there were other characters that I am just, inherently more interested in. So there were two issues. One did lead into the other. There's the Hawkman, Hawkgirl issue where Superman helps them fight off this Thanagarian invasion. And at the end of the issue, the Hawks blast the invading armada across the universe, but Superman is caught in that blast. And so at the beginning of the next issue, he's been flung across the universe and he's found by the Green Lantern Corps.
Yeah.
So, like, that idea, I guess, was cool. And you see how the pieces of the DC universe connect. But again, I mean, I don't know that I could tell you much more about those issues.
No. Okay. This will kind of tell you. So we get to the Hawkwoman issue. All I write was, need Superman's help. Soup's kind of sarcastic. Hawkman won't really have it. Lots of action. Continues in the next book. And then all I write for 589 was, ugh, Green Lantern Corps. Like, I'm excited HBO Max is going to try to do a series that I bet could lend a lot of character development and do that. I don't know. I love Green Lantern. Cannot stand anytime there's a Green Lantern Corps book. I don't know why. It just, like, it never interests me or holds me enough past 2-3 issues. I'm like, okay, go back to Kyle Rayner, go back to Hal Jordan. We're fine.
It's funny you say that. I mean, I don't share those exact sentiments about the Green Lantern Corps, though I'm not the biggest fan, but I like, it's funny. I guess if I had to sum it up, I like the concept of the Green Lantern Corps more than
Right.
I actually like the execution and I like the stories for the most part. I too am looking forward to the HBO series. I hope that it's good. But yeah, so that was that little, I don't know if you even call it a two-parter, but those two issues, that's what was going on there.
And I'm with you. I love, like, I guess I love the mythology of the Green Lantern Corps, Oa, the Guardians, like all, it's great. But again, it doesn't light my fire enough to be like, ooh. I mean, I found myself kind of skimming and flipping a little bit more on those issues and going, did I miss something important? So, how'd you feel about the Booster Gold issues of 594 going into number 23?
Yeah, I didn't really have a strong feeling about them. I guess I enjoyed them well enough. I like the idea of another Metropolis-based hero. And I mean, what was kind of cool here was, unlike the other stories for the most part where, Superman's really teaming up with the hero or fighting a villain like Silver Banshee. I mean, here it's another hero, but one he's at odds with to an extent. I mean, we find out the Booster he's fighting initially is not the real Booster, but even the real Booster is not the biggest Superman fan. So, yeah, overall, that was one of the stronger areas, I would say, of the run for me. What about you? I know you had some notes on that one.
No, so here's the thing. Booster Gold is kind of an enigma of a character if you really think about it. So, and if you listen to our last cast, you'll hear, like, I love Justice League Unlimited. They do a great episode. It was just talking the same thing about how it's the greatest story never told, I think it was maybe episode, but it's Booster really wants to be the hero in the spotlight all the time. The problem is Booster is a hero for hire. And the way I've tried to explain to people, they're like, why would you like Booster Gold? And I was like, well, take Bruce Wayne, but not Batman. Take Bruce Wayne, put him in a power suit, and try to make him a superhero. Like, even Luthor is trying to piss off Booster Gold. He's trying to fight out for his, different companies at the end. But there's just three things that I think we should talk about. One, Dan Jurgens' art is just always so on point. Anytime Superman's in a Dan Jurgens book, I was like, and that is my Superman. That's who I pay attention to. And even how he draws Booster, it's just incredible. Two, one of the best lines in that whole issue was, I believe Batman says, I don't know how the League puts up with you, Booster. I was like, yes, like finally somebody's talking about that. But yeah, he won't do good things unless he's sponsored or hired to do them. So it goes against everything that Superman is and stands for. So those are the only things I wanted to mention that stand out to me. Mostly just Dan Jurgens is great. So
yeah, that was cool. And of course we know, the incredible tenure that he's going to have on Superman. So yeah, it was cool to see one of these earlier issues where he draws the character. That was cool. There was something funny in the Phantom Stranger issue. It just made me laugh, where I think it starts Superman's like finishing up some adventure and he goes to his apartment, which, side note, there's next to no Clark Kent in these issues. I mean, like one or two where you see him in his Clark Kent identity. Again, I think another one of the reasons why I didn't get so into this. But anyway, in this issue, he comes back to his apartment and he finds the Phantom Stranger there. And he's like, I need your help. And Superman's reaction is like, find somebody else. He's like, listen, supernatural stuff is really not my thing. Like, I'm tired. But it felt like a very real moment. And I like that a lot. But then, too, it's like in that issue, Phantom Stranger doesn't fully explain to Superman what's going on. In the Demon issue, the Demon doesn't fully explain to Superman what's going on when he sends it back in time. It's like issue after issue. It's like if you just gave this guy some more information,
something,
through this a lot faster.
He might help you more, too. Like, and what's the quote? There are some things man was not meant to know. And I was like, no, that's not going to make him help you the next time, Phantom Stranger. It's just, again, I think I'm with you. I never could get into Phantom Stranger. I love the old look of it, but that's about it. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I want to, we'll talk more about, any other issues that you have notes on, but I want to jump to, and I don't have the issue number, but the one where Lois goes to Smallville. So
this is 597.
Thank you. So this is right after the Millennium event where, we find out that Lana and all the other children of Smallville have been agents of the Manhunters and all that stuff. And in one of the prior issues of Superman, I believe, Lana, under the control of the Manhunters, rips open Clark's shirt. Thankfully, he's not wearing his costume. She flies out. So, Lois naturally is suspicious. She tracks Lana to Smallville. And she finds Lana, at home in the kitchen with Superman, not Clark, but Superman. And very shortly thereafter, the Kents show up. And this was so funny.
It's the best. It's the best. It really is.
And I never knew that this was part of the story at any point, let alone at this time. But Pa comes up with this cover story. Bernie, would you like to do the honors? What does he tell Lois to help get them out of this pickle?
And I love that this was even the first thing that theoretically came to Jonathan Kent's mind. But so we actually found Superman's rocket. And we've been hiding him for years, and him and Clark grew up together in the same house. So, and then Lois like, wait, so you're telling me they're stepbrothers? Yes, Lois, that's exactly what we're telling you. And I wrote in caps, Lois is pissed. Like, she loses it. I mean, it's hilarious to me.
It is so funny. So I know I used a Friends analogy in another episode, and I'm going to do it again now. I don't know how familiar you are with the show.
We have just finished binging. We are on season 10 with one of my daughters. So
good,
we watched it when it aired. So
all right. So in season 4, there's this storyline where Joey is dating Kathy, and then Chandler develops feelings for her, and they kiss, and then Chandler confesses to Joey something happened, and Joey goes, "Did you sleep with her?" And Chandler's like, "No, we just kissed." And Joey goes, That's worse. That's worse. Chandler's like, "How is that worse?" And Joey goes, "I don't know, but it's the same." That's what I thought of here. It's like, it's at least the same as saying that Clark is Superman. Like, I don't know how this helps. I feel like it just makes it worse and more complicated, that now, like, he has to, not only does he have to continue to pretend to be two different people, but stepbrothers, no less.
Yeah. And now it's even more clear that Superman and Clark could be in the same room together.
Right.
And then later, like, Lois is still pissed off. She's like, "No, you've stolen the exclusives from me all this time. You're not taking this one." Do you remember? So that I think I don't know if it was Action or another one, but Superman's about to leave. It's the robot Superman. Clark is next to him. And he's like, "I'll go with you to make sure we can take care of this." And Lois is like, "No, I'm coming with you. You two have done enough to me." So then robot Superman's carrying Clark and Lois. And I'm like, how does this make the story better for everybody now? This is hard.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I agree. And it's amazing. I can't believe I know I haven't read this run in full, but I can't believe I never knew that this was part of the story for a moment. I have more to say when you and I talk about Adventures of Superman from this time, but this is a good point I just want to mention briefly. Lois really got the short end of the stick during the Byrne-era. She basically has one mode, angry.
Yeah.
Across the board, like across all, I mean, she has a very minimal role in action. We only see her really a few times, but in Superman and in Adventures, and when we see her here, she's just angry. I really think she was not developed nearly as well as, like, Cat Grant, for example, who we'll talk about when we get to Adventures.
Right. And Lois is in Adventures quite a bit, actually, but she's part of the Gangbuster storyline. And there's a kind of a cool arc happening between her and Jose Delgado, which is great. But Cat Grant basically is a substitute for Lois that we think of as Lois in all of this. I kind of wrote that I just don't like Lois at all. And the only time I think I put her back on, like, I'm on Team Lois, was part of Action 600, where she's walking through the park and she's really contemplative and she's thinking, I kind of liked being known as Superman's girlfriend, but now I don't like that somebody else is getting the attention. I don't like that Wonder Woman might be in the picture. What do I have to offer that Wonder Woman doesn't? And I saw, like, oh, there's human Lois. That's great. But then it's done. And I'm like, wow, it took 16 issues for us to even approach that. And the history that we see of Lois is confident, caring, like, always will be there for Clark and always will be there for Superman. So it was hard for me to read.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Action 600, and that's Byrne's final issue of Superman. And, it begins with Superman and Wonder Woman locking lips, and then they go off on an adventure and ultimately come to the conclusion that, they're not the right fit.
Right.
I guess what were your thoughts about that issue? And I'm also curious what you thought about the dialogue between the two of them throughout the issue.
So it was odd. Well, first of all, so 599, whatever aired right before whatever came out right before 600, it ends with this big page of Superman kissing Wonder Woman, and everybody's like, whoa. And then
it's an issue of adventures that leads right into it.
Yeah. So we get to 600. They kind of do the previously on, and he lands and he goes right up to her and he plants one on her, and she's kind of like, whoa, what's going on? And even how he comes off, like, I just been thinking about you. I think that we would be great together. She's like, I'm not sure. We're not at that point. But as they're talking, as usual, something goes down. They're going to Olympus, and Darkseid shows. And there's a lot of just stuff. Big, like it's our 600th issue blowout action story that it was okay. Again, I actually was surprised how much I flipped. I was like, okay. Oh, that's neat. But I don't know. I didn't love the Superman Wonder Woman dialogue at all. I thought it was convoluted. I thought it made Superman look stupid, actually.
Yeah. So that was my feeling as well. And I too skimmed through most of it. And, this feeds into my larger frustration that comes up in a lot of these episodes now. So I don't have any of those Man of Steel trades. Most of them are out of print. I know DC is now putting out new Man of Steel hardcovers collecting this era. Great. I hope they complete the run. But so I read on the app, and of course 600 is the one issue in this run that's missing. You might think that they would have one of their key anniversary issues. I read this though, here's the thing. Normally I would never advocate for any kind of piracy, but you know what? DC, you don't make it easy to read your shit. It's like, it's like really getting on my nerves now as I'm going through these episodes. So I found, like, on Read Comics Online or something, I found the issue. So I read like the beginning and end, and most of the middle I kind of skimmed through. I was more just looking to see how they played out the dynamic between Superman and Wonder Woman.
I don't know whether it was because Dan DiDio was still in charge at that time, but he did a really good job of, like, trying to make trades come out the way they should be. The end of the very last, so there's 9 Man of Steel trades. The first one is just the miniseries. The 9th one is the last of the run. They stopped doing these trades altogether, but it ends with 600. So it was smart to do it that way. I purposely, Anthony, I don't get the app. I know there's tons of stuff on there possibly that I could read. I've got it all in original copy in bags and boards that I really don't love taking them out to look at, to be honest. But I kind of won't do it for that reason, because I feel like I'll get more mad than I will enjoy using it.
Yeah, it's it's been a source of frustration. I mean, a friend of mine recently asked, if it was worth it, and I said it depends. It depends what you're looking for. All the new stuff is on there, which is great if you just want to keep up. But for the older stuff, it's spottier. It's spottier than I feel it should be for the price point, for the comics that we're talking about. I mean, I'm not talking obscure stuff here. It's Action Comics. Yeah. I feel very passionately about this. All right, let me get off my soapbox. I'm like really getting angry here. But as far as Superman and Wonder Woman, here's the thing. I'm sort of split on the way Superman comes across, because on the one hand, it's like, I don't know, he comes from this small town. He clearly has not had much experience in this realm. No. So it kind of makes sense that he would come off like that. At the same time, it's like he traveled the world. He's been living in Metropolis. It's like, you got to have a little bit more game than that, buddy. And Wonder Woman, I just felt like she just did not feel, human, which I mean, I guess is part of the point. Like, she is, she really is kind of coming from a different place. And so it doesn't play like as natural or humanistic as you might want. And I guess that's by design, but it just overall came off like, again, I guess the intention was for it to be awkward. So it succeeded.
Yeah, it definitely succeeded. even when he's flying through the clouds and saying, "I've got a date with an angel," and I'm like, what's happening here? What's going on? Like, I know it's going towards that, but he's just being so weird. And the Wonder Woman stuff made sense to me only because I believe at this time George Perez is doing all the Wonder Woman stuff. And he did, for those that, I mean, his run was very focused on Wonder Woman as dealing with, she's basically a god. Like, she's pretty darn close, and dealing with understanding the world of men as a god and being stuck in the middle. So her portrayal made sense to me. Superman did not. Like, it seemed, granted, he's a Boy Scout, but he also did date Lana through a lot of his younger years. So that bothered me quite a bit. I actually enjoyed in 600 the side stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the like I said, the Lois Lane one, this is also when people refer to Lex Luthor getting kryptonite poisoning, that issue is where it comes from. So he has the signet ring on all the time. He's in a ton of pain. Dr. Kelly tells him, you wanted to stay safe this whole time with your kryptonite ring, but it ultimately is giving you poison now, and you may have to lose your hand. And he's like, what? And he's like banging it down. So, but
Yeah.
that's what I take from it. It's more landmark than special, to be honest.
Gotcha. I mean, to be honest, I don't really have a ton more to say about this run, and I don't mean to be overly down on it. I guess, to be honest, I think I just felt let down because I enjoyed the issues of Superman more than I expected to. And I was hoping that I would have a similar experience here. And I didn't. But anyway, it was what it was. It was a key piece of this run of comics and Byrne's work on the character. Is there anything else that you want to say about Byrne's action?
To be honest, the best part of this run to me now is the cover art. I will switch that out on my walls because I think it's just fun to have up and do that kind of stuff. But from the internal part of the book, I have the trades, but I'm honestly not sure I'll ever read those again.
Fair enough. And that was John Byrne's run on Action Comics. And we'll be right back. Shaddadigans is a weekly podcast by dads sharing their fairly new dad experiences and also just talking about whatever. Listen, relate, and laugh. I was a guest on episode 90, and it was a blast. One of the hosts is a multiple guest of this show, Justin DeVoe. To follow Justin's fitness and cosplay journey, follow him on Instagram at RealLifeLobo. And if you're interested in starting or continuing your own fitness journey, check out Iron and Honor on Instagram. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. If you enjoy this show, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. I also hope you'll consider joining my Patreon community. The support of my patrons enables me to produce this podcast, and patrons get rewards too, including exclusive episodes, advanced listens, and more. Sign up today and get instant access to the back catalog. Visit patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Thank you to all of my patrons. I truly appreciate your support. Now, Bernie, we turn our attention to Adventures of Superman during the Byrne-era, initially written by Marv Wolfman and later by Byrne himself, and co-plotted and drawn by Jerry Ordway throughout. Specifically, we're talking about Adventures of Superman issues 424 through 444. What were your big picture takeaways from your reread of this run?
I like this a whole lot better than Action, not just because the storylines seem more cohesive. We're seeing 3, 4, 5 part story arcs that are connecting. I personally love the supporting cast of Superman. I think whether it's Maggie Sawyer and Dan Turpin, Cat Grant, Dr. Hamilton we see for the first time. Again, Bibbo. Bibbo shows up.
Oh, yes.
And here, so something really interesting that nobody realizes that Byrne and Wolfman did. So Cat Grant, Bibbo, Gangbuster, Dr. Hamilton, Maggie Sawyer, Rampage, Silver Banshee, Checkmate, and the modern age Supergirl as Matrix were all created and introduced during the Wolfman Byrne era. And we think they've been around for, well, I guess it has been years. I mean, I guess it's been 40 years now, but they seem like staples if you're a Superman fan, but this is exactly this era for listeners is where they all started. And it's kind of cool to see their origins. And then Marv Wolfman, man, I'm a huge fan because we were just talking. You got Crisis on Infinite Earths, as you can see behind me, the massive Alex Ross Crisis poster.
Yeah, it's very cool. We used to have that hanging up in my old comic shop. I used to see that every day. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, Alex Ross actually signed it. It's on the bottom left, so that makes me happy every day I walk in.
Nice.
So Crisis on Infinite Earths with Marv Wolfman, the very next project he takes over is Adventures of Superman with Jerry Ordway. And then once he leaves Adventures of Superman, he then starts his Deathstroke the Terminator run, which not many people remember too, that he not only created the character, he did a 60 issue, maybe 80, I think even, of Deathstroke. But you definitely see awesome writing with him and Jerry Ordway. Jerry Ordway is a huge staple too of the Superman universe through the 90s too. So, but yeah, how did you feel about this? Clearly, I love the Adventures run. So how do you feel?
I was very taken by it as well. This whole reading project of the Byrne era has been a little bit of a roller coaster for me because I started off going into the Superman read with somewhat measured expectations and really enjoying it. I then hoped that would carry over to the action issues, and it did not, as we discussed. And then so I came into Adventures kind of hoping that it would redeem the reading project overall. And, I have to say it did. I really enjoyed it a lot, especially those earlier Wolfman issues. Not that I disliked the Byrne ones, but I really felt like there was a lot of good stuff in this run. The things that I enjoyed the most, like you, was really the treatment of the supporting cast, especially Cat Grant. I really found that Adventures in particular, really gave her a lot of dimension and heart and humanity. I really, really loved the role she played. I mean, she emerged as a true love interest that I don't think they really, I think they could have taken it further, to be honest. I really think that they could have done more with that because I think it was a very pleasant surprise to see the potential that was there.
She throws herself at him so much. Like Clark, it's kind of funny because there are even times where he says nothing. He just ignores her totally. But then she's on his lap. She's not even being inappropriate. She's just so clearly enamored with Clark and wants to be his girlfriend. And Clark's like, yeah, no, I don't know if that'd be appropriate, Kat. It's like, oh, dude, what are you doing? Lois clearly doesn't want anything to do with you. So you should be going with Cat Grant.
That's the thing. And, you and I touched on this when we talked about the action run. And this came up also when Dan and I talked about the Superman issues. Lois really, I don't think she was treated very well during this period. She, and it's not that she's, too tough or too angry. It's that it seems, with the exception of those scenes with Jose Delgado, aka Gangbuster, which we'll talk about, with the exception of that storyline, her character is very one note. I mean, she basically starts off the Byrne era angry at Clark for scooping the first Superman story. And then just as she starts to warm up to him, there's always something, whether Clark's spending time with Kat or, as we talked about when we did our discussion of the action run, the preposterous cover story that Pa Kent comes up with, that basically Clark and Superman are stepbrothers. And then Lois feels like, this has all been a ruse. Well, I mean, she's not wrong, but this ruse
she's
that they've been carrying out, against her all this time. And so she just goes, from angry to angry to angry. And I just don't feel like you get much dimension there. Whereas with Kat, it's she does come off as this, vivacious, party girl. But then, you get to know her. You get to see that she lost custody of her son. She's trying to get him back. She genuinely cares for Clark and for Clark, right? It's not a Superman infatuation. It's really that And I think she describes him at one point as like, you're a true gentleman, like one of the last gentlemen, but he's not soft. He's not weak. Which also, of course, speaks to the way Clark himself was written during this time. But, she genuinely liked Clark. Yeah, I liked that dynamic a lot. I wish they went further with it.
I feel that like you kind of hit the nail on the head too. Clark isn't treated bumbling. He isn't super strong and like. I think I love the fact that he is a figure that she really cares for and finds attractive and wants to be around. They continue with this a little bit past the Byrne run with Cat Grant, but it kind of takes a little bit of a backseat to Lois eventually. Because once the Byrne-era is done, something must have happened in publishing or editing that they go like, oh, okay, we're not treating Lois right. And they start to kind of course correct. But I don't know if you remember this, but there's a heartbreaking issue about Cat Grant and her son.
Oh, I remember. I was reading the Superman books regularly. That was shortly after the death of Superman, and I remember that. I remember as a kid, I was to this day. I mean, it's funny.
That's devastating.
Like how many issues from that time, can I like really single out that I remember vividly? Not a ton, but that one, the Toyman issue with her son, that was really, really brutal.
Yeah, and I mean, as I'm reading it, I mean, they just killed off Superman, so they're taking risks. It's like, wow, like not only are kids getting kidnapped, but they go through with killing her son, and that was devastating, and that changed the character a lot too after that because she became a lot more tortured, which was hard. But seeing her in this, she's so vivacious and fun and wants to be around everybody, and especially Clark, which I loved seeing throughout Adventures. And again, Lois is so focused on Jose Delgado, who, by the way, I love that Jose Delgado character for various reasons.
Yes, and I want to talk about that because honestly, the gang war storyline to me was the most compelling and resonant of this run. But the last thing I want to say about Lois, in fairness, I guess, to play somewhat of devil's advocate, I really think they overshot the mark, but I have to imagine that part of this was due to, so much of pre-crisis Lois was this, Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, infatuated with Superman, wanting to marry Superman, especially in the Silver Age. They really didn't do her any favors. So I have to imagine that they really wanted to, do a 180 from that, but I think they went too far, in the other direction. And, it's weird to me, I guess, because, you then bring in the Cat character. So there's clearly some function that needs to be served here with Lois being utilized the way she is. So yeah, I think they were a little bit off, but it was, I mean, I guess I never really would have thought of Cat as a viable love interest. Cause again, by the time, just to put this in context, by the time I come into this, just a few years later, I mean, Lois and Clark are engaged.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that's my starting point here. And, Kat, as you said, would have shortly thereafter go through the loss of her son and the direction that took her character. When you think about other depictions of Cat Grant, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, she's there for the first season.
Oh,
very one note, very over the top. Yeah. You don't get that much there. So I guess I've never had like a high opinion of the character or much of an opinion of the character. So, to see her used here, especially when Lois is really, I guess, again, not serving any of the functions that you like typically associate with the character. I feel like Cat Grant, the character, really stepped up. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about the Gangwar storyline. And yes, there are plenty of issues in this run that deal with, the man of war machines that Superman has to fight. And there's that Greek guy who thinks he's a god and he has the satellite that's controlling the weather. There are over the top stories like that. But there was this, multi-issue storyline about, the gangs in Metropolis that, Lex behind the scenes is, trying to consolidate and used to do his bidding. Perry White's son, Jerry, is caught up in this, and it's really like a battle for this kid's soul. We have Jose Delgado, this guidance counselor at the high school who lives in Suicide Slum, who's trying to, turn these kids around. He ultimately adopts this costumed identity as Gangbuster. He has this relationship with Lois Lane. I was so pleasantly taken with that storyline. And I think the thing about it that was so compelling is that, this gives Superman a problem. He can't punch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, you know, yes, he can round up, you know, if he sees, you know, these gang members robbing a store, he can round them up, but that doesn't solve the problem. And that doesn't get at the root of the issues, especially in the suicide slum area. It was a really, that was my favorite part of the Adventures issues. What about you?
Yeah, let's talk about the fact that, can you really think of a Latino character that was in the spotlight like that at that time frame? I mean, almost overshadowing Superman himself in Adventures of Superman.
Yeah.
I think that was a bold, awesome move by the DC executives and the editors currently at the time. It might have been Eddie Costanza still. I don't know who it was at that point way back. I don't know. Was it Denny O'Neil?
Mike Carlin. Mike Carlin was.
It was Mike Carlin. Oh,
yeah.
Good. Yeah, because maybe Eddie took over after that. But first of all, I love that. I mean, he was a counselor. It was a glorified, I don't know whether he was a high school counselor or just a community, like youth community group kind of counselor, but clearly cared for these kids. And then, you know, you saw white kids, Latino kids, Asian kids in these gangs struggling. Lex is awful as usual and never want to take the blame. He always has some other lackey doing it for him. He's giving these massive weapons to these kids and trying to turn their lives around. Jose sees all of it happening. And what I love about this character, Anthony, is that this is what, if this happened today, what happens to Jose is what would happen to a superhero if he tried doing this stuff today. Like, it doesn't end well right now for where we leave Jose off. He's paralyzed from the waist down, messed up his left eye socket. He's broken. Lois, for Pete's sake, had to carry him up the stairs at the last issue we read with him in this run. But how realistic would that be? Think about it. Yeah. Like, that's probably how that would go down if your high school counselor got pissed off enough and tried to take this on himself. He'd get the crap kicked out of him. Like, even if he was doing a good job for a while, eventually he's going to get taken out. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, going back to what you were saying before and what I talked about with Dan as well, I mean, just seeing the beginnings of these supporting cast members. Because, again, I knew Gangbuster from later on, but to see where he gets to start and, yeah, the heartbreaking turn his story takes, but sadly a very realistic one.
Right.
Yeah, his story was so strong. And, you know, you mentioned, we talked about Jerry White. Side note with Jerry White, there's one of the issues, I don't know if it's the cops or someone, but they address him as Perry White Jr.,
yeah, and he's
like, no, it's Jerry. Now, there might be some piece of the backstory that I'm missing here, but it's like, if you like hate your dad so much, you're like, I don't want his name. I don't want to be Perry Jr. I'll be Jerry.
Yeah. Like, how about Bob? Like something that doesn't sound like Perry.
You know, it's like if your son was Bernie Jr. and he was like, nah, my dad, call me Ernie. It's like,
Bernie.
How's that? That's not different enough. That's not different enough. But anyway.
Oh, by the way, spoilers. It doesn't end well for Jerry White. Let's just put it that way.
That's that's after this.
Yeah. And sadly, there's no trades, I believe, that collect. I might be wrong. Maybe it's an Exile. It might be in that trade, but check it out. It's really heart-wrenching. That if you want to keep reading down this road, it's good.
I will. I mean, that's what the rest of this series of episodes is all about. And between the app and some eBay single issues that I bought, I have everything. So I'm going to read it all.
Oh, nice. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, this is a whole thing here. But you know,
you ain't messing around, brother.
No, this has been a long time coming. This has been the biggest gap in my Superman reading history.
Yeah.
And I'm closing it. So there's this great Perry White issue. I love when Perry gets the spotlight. I feel like he's one of the most underutilized, underrated characters. If I ever have an opportunity to like write a Superman comic, it'd be a Perry White story. Anyway, so there's this, this issue where Perry, has exposed this, crime boss, and he's going to testify and they kidnap his son to force him to print a retraction, and Perry doesn't.
Oh, it's hard.
Doesn't. It's such a tough issue. And as a father, I'm like, oh my God, like this guy is so committed to the truth that he's willing, he's racked with, doubt over this, and he goes back and forth, but he's lucky that he catches a break and, his son is saved. But that was a real tough issue.
Well, and I think if I remember it right, reading it, I think he's about to pull the trigger on doing it. And then Jerry's released, but then he still can't win
Yeah.
because Jerry's basically like, Dad, I'm your son. You didn't do anything seriously. And Perry doesn't even get the chance to be like, son, it was really hard. I was about to do this, but like, it's like too little too late. And Jerry's like, well, F you, Dad. And it's like, boop, gone. And there's a lot of hard stuff in Adventures of Superman. It's actually pretty gripping. It's really cool.
Yeah, it was really a very pleasant surprise because again, the run starts with the Man of War, machines that are attacking the city, and it's like okay, and but once we really get into the gang storyline, it is very compelling, and the issue where Jose is beaten and paralyzed, it's told in a really interesting way where we have this dual story structure where the top half of each page is Lex telling the story about basically, I guess what he hopes will happen or what he thinks Superman is capable of in terms of the destruction and his lack of caring. And then the bottom half is what's actually playing out as Jose is going up against the supervillain that Lex has created and set loose.
Yeah.
And Jose is defending Lois and the other movie theater goers. And, that's where he ends up, again, getting paralyzed. But it's heartbreaking, but a really cool structure. And that was definitely an outlier in terms of the way the story was told. And I thought that was a cool one.
Yeah, I found myself, when I noticed they separated the two out, I paused and I just read across the entire bottom one first. Because I'm like, oh, this is clearly what's going on. And then I went back and read the entire top section. It was a really cool contrast of like Luthor trying to put his spin on things, which again points out how crazy he is, how maniacal. When they say he's just egomaniacal, that's it. Like he doesn't even see things on the same level of all of us. He has a story he's telling himself. And I think there's even an issue where they think Superman is dead. I don't know whether I can't remember if it's action or adventures in this run, and I think maybe because I think Superman falls through and he's in the hospital and they think he dies, and Luthor loses it because he thinks, and he's like, "No, I was supposed to kill him," and I was like, "Wow, that's a great example of why Luthor's like, no, it was my job to take him down. The world will know that I killed Superman." I was like, wow, he must be really pissed off at Doomsday. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that. I mean, there is a very similar reaction where it's, I think the way they play it, because at this point in the Superman comics, he's Lex Luthor the second, right? He's
red-haired, yeah.
Yeah, his brain into his cloned body, and he's posing as his own son. And I think he releases some negative feelings, and I think it's perceived by others to be grief over Superman's death. It's really anger that he wasn't the one to do it, which is so in keeping with the character. But Perry, of course, is dealing with his son and has that issue that was, again, it was a tough pill to swallow as a father, but it is revelatory about the character of Perry White and his journalistic integrity and his commitment to the truth. I mean, it really shows you, show not tell, it really shows you a lot about him. Jimmy Olsen during this period, I feel like he's still sort of transitioning because he's still Jeepers and he's still got the bow tie and he's a real mama's boy, but he's getting involved with Kat a little bit. There's some stuff that goes on there where there's clearly some infatuation on his part. I think it's an issue of Superman where like she invites him over and she's like pouring him wine and it's this whole thing. But for the most part, her sights really seem to be fixed on Clark. But there is the issue where Jimmy is at the convenience store and some of these gang members, including Jerry, rob it. And Jimmy, inspired by the example of Superman, chases them down. It's like a motorcycle chase. It's so over the top. And I felt like, I don't know. I know this is a weird reaction, but I felt like, man, this is like an irresponsible message to like put out there for kids. It's like no one was hurt in this robbery. Like you could have just let them go. I don't know. You don't necessarily want to set that example, I think, but it was interesting. It was cool to see, him be so inspired.
And this may rub some Superman fans the wrong way, but to this day, I can't fully get Jimmy Olsen. I understand his purpose. I don't know. I don't always mind when I see Jimmy getting the crap kicked out of him or something happening. I was like, that's good. That's fine. And even Kat, when she's like, I don't go for bow ties. And he's like, oh, bow tie. And I'm like, I feel like he's always out of time. Like he's not in the right era. He's always like 20 years behind wherever we are in the story. It's just, I don't know. I don't dislike him. I just don't love him.
I understand, and I'm going to do a full episode on Jimmy at some point in the future on the podcast, and we'll really look at him as he's evolved over time. But yeah, I mean, I think there are some modern takes on the character. The first thing that comes to mind, because I read it recently, was what Grant Morrison did with him in the New 52, where, you know, he and Clark were really peers and contemporaries, and I think that goes a long way. I think, you know, the way Jimmy is often positioned is like the little kid brother sort of dynamic. And like what Morrison did with him, again, like they were really buddies. Like Clark and Jimmy were truly buddies. It wasn't just like Clark was the established reporter that Jimmy looked up to, you know? And I think that helps. Cause yeah, I know I'm not always, you know, so invested in the character of Jimmy.
I have a hard time gauging how old Jimmy's supposed to be sometimes. And I think from reboot to reboot, they shifted a little bit. Sometimes you wonder, is he 16 to 18? Sometimes is he 21 to 23? And then, like you just said, he's sometimes if they're closer in age to Clark and that kind of stuff too. I like it more when they're closer in age. I think it works better. I think he's not treated as stupid. I mean, honestly, even in the Jurgens run, I think his role in being with Lois when Superman's getting killed, I like that age even. I can deal with that pretty well. But I don't really love it when I can't tell what age he is. That always throws me off quite a bit. That's what it made for me. The Cat Grant stuff made it really weird for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think the other reason too why I like them as contemporaries is that like Clark doesn't have many male friends.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so you know, and it's like, yes, he has, you know, Bruce, but it's like, that's a very different dynamic. So like, I like the idea of him actually having a buddy. I mean, yeah, there's Pete Ross, but he gets very little play. So yeah, I like the idea of them being more, you know, kind of on the same level. And here, not only do you have the difference in age, but like Clark, again, like years are covered in that Man of Steel miniseries. So it's like, you know, like Clark is deep into his career. He's already a novelist, a successful novelist. People talk about like, oh, I love your last novel. It's like, this guy gets a lot done. Oh, I'm so that came. I'm glad that popped into my head because I wanted to mention one of my favorite issues of the Adventures run was when Clark is feeling overwhelmed and he's trying to make it to Smallville for Ma and Pa's anniversary party.
Oh, and then he misses it.
And he misses it. And he's so down on himself. And Pa has this heart to heart with him. He's like, listen, like you're doing your best. Like you're a good man. Like it's okay. But I thought, you know, when we talk about this era generally, and I think the lengths that it went to make the character more grounded, more relatable, more human, I think that's a perfect representation of that because it really shows, you know, something that I think all of us can identify with. It's like, no, we might not be juggling our parents' anniversary party with superheroics, but it's like we all know what it's like to have a lot of plates spinning and to feel overwhelmed and like we can't get it all done. And that's exactly what this guy was going through. I love that issue.
Okay, so for listeners, this is a really important. If you love the Kents, especially Pa Kent, this is Adventures 430. I wrote an asterisk in bold, big scene with Pa. I even wrote volume 4, page 43 to 44. So what Anthony's talking about is Clark walks in beat up and they're like, what happened, son? And he said, I've been fighting a war, Pa, a war between a legend and a man, and the legend won. And I love, like, and he's down on himself, but I tell you, Anthony, like, I love that you brought that up because this whole 2 pages is basically why Pa Kent's important to the Superman universe. Yeah. Like, and that was one of the first things I wrote as my big overarching is that this universe has to have the Kents in it for Superman to work. And I feel the only time the Superman universe works is when the Kents are in his life. And these, man, if you've got the app or if you've got the issue, pull out Adventures 430, read those pages. You will not be disappointed. I love that you brought that up, Anthony.
Yeah, I know it's funny because I meant to, and then it left me, and then as I was on that spiel, I was like, oh, I thought of that.
I was scrolling through my notes, going like, "Where's the bold one? I swear I have a bold note." Yeah.
We can obviously go back to anything that you want that we've already touched on, but this run also introduces the post-crisis Brainiac.
Oh. Sorry.
Milton Fine, the circus mentalist.
Yeah.
Which that's the version of Brainiac I grew up with. And,
that's me too. Yeah.
And it's only been like now going back and certainly, like the animated series and other incarnations, gave us a more traditional take, but still in the comics, like that's what I grew up reading. So it was really interesting to meet Milton Fine at the circus in his human form. What was your take on that story?
I was having some severe, like, I guess it would now be 35-year-old deja vu where I had Adventures 441. Again, as a kid, I didn't have every issue. You'd get like spot issues here and there. And 441 with Mxyzptlk. I looked at the, in the trades, they do the cover in the trade and then the issue itself. Some of the trades have all the covers in the back. But I saw that cover and I was like, whoa. And like my childhood came back to me. I literally was reading that whole issue, having deja vu. And then Milton Fine shows up and there's a scene like his girlfriend is like basically going to break up with him. And then his like mental powers, he like smashes something against the wall. And I was a kid again. I was like, oh, like this guy's about to erupt and explode. And this poor, like weird, nerdy circus dude is going to like just come out as this super powered Kaluan that we don't know what the heck is happening. So I hate it and I love it because I love the current version of Brainiac, like the Jeff Johns, that vibe kind of. I really enjoy that Brainiac, but this was my kid Brainiac, like you just said. I love it, but it's so weird.
It is weird, right? Because like he seems to have some psychic powers on his own, but then there is this Kaluan, psyche that's invading him, but the doctors just chalk it up to psychosis.
Right.
And then and that's the thing, by the end of this issue, he's not even fully Brainiac. That will come later in issues that we didn't read for this. And, he would play a large role as this version of Brainiac, throughout the 90s. I know there's a big storyline there's Panic in the Sky.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I'm going to be getting to that. I'm looking forward to it. And then, a story that I did read in the night, I think this was 94. There was the Dead Again storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Who's involved. And so, this version of Brainiac got a lot of play for a long time. I guess I've never given a ton of thought to Brainiac. He's never been my favorite villain, to be perfectly honest. I guess I sort of like the Smallville incarnation where he does have a human guise, but then he is this artificial intelligence. So I feel like that's kind of a nice in between and a way around a limited TV budget to be able to show him in human form. But
I've always loved the Superman animated series concept of Brainiac. I love Brainiac as a computer form that comes down to the robot version, that like cold, dead inside like approach, because I remember it from that. And I think we're all tainted by a dash of nostalgia, right? Like it's like, oh, that was my first, or that's who I know as, and that's why I like older generations. Like when they're listening to your Silver Age podcast, are like, that was my Superman, or oh, Bronze, that was my Superman. So this might be somebody's Brainiac. Milton Fine might be our Brainiac, but others not so much. But I find it like wonderfully hilarious. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's I posed this question to Dan Greenfield when we talked about the Byrne Superman run, but I want to get your take on it as well, because it's sort of a big picture question of this era, and I think it's worth getting another take on it. Some villains, Mxyzptlk is a good example. He was brought back in a very recognizable form. But then you have a character like Brainiac that really got reinvented in a big way. And then you also have, and this is the end of the run here, the Byrne-era, that Supergirl saga with the Pocket Universe Matrix Supergirl and the Pocket Universe Zod and the other Kryptonian criminals. And, I guess the question that I posed to Dan is that, obviously they were really stripping down the mythology coming out of Crisis, right? And really focusing on Superman as the sole survivor. And, that makes sense. But then it's like very quickly into Post-Crisis, we get these, like bastardized versions of the tradition as seemingly like a way around, the mandate of the era. And I guess my question is like, I don't know, did it work? Like, was it worth it? Like, what did it make sense to kind of have like okay, there you go. Go for it.
No, sorry to just like, no. I guess I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. Okay, so I love Smallville because Smallville was the Superman show that was on at the time, and I learned to love it for what it was and what it set out to do. But now I'm watching Superman and Lois, and I'm going, why didn't you just give me that then? Like I wanted Superman and Lois then. Give me that. You're telling me there were no good writers back for the 10 years the Smallville was on? So I guess to connect that, I'd rather not have Zod. I'd rather not have Supergirl and wait. Like, make us be annoyingly patient. And look at how they used Supergirl then in the 2000s. Look at how they used Zod and that story. Like, that comes with a punch. Supergirl is awesome for so many reasons across so many writers. Like, why go Supergirl and make us go question mark? And then, oh, it's not Supergirl. Like, it just, bastardize is a great word for that, actually. But I personally, I'd rather have zero of it. And I'm more pissed off at Superman 22 because, like, then that gave Zack Snyder the okay to have Superman kill Zod. So, and I know that's we couldn't go a podcast without bringing up Zack Snyder. So.
It's fine. It's funny because when it's okay because when Dan and I talked about it, Dan spoke for a good little bit about why he was okay with the killing of Zod in Superman 22, but why he had so many objections in Man of Steel, and I was sitting and listening very patiently, and then I just said, Dan, respectfully, I disagree, and again, I think we can agree to disagree on that, but yeah, and so that's how the run ends. And, again, Dan and I did talk about this, that 3-part finale was the Superman 21 and 22 and Adventures 444 with the Pocket Universe and the Matrix Supergirl and the good Lex Luthor and Zod and the others and all that stuff. I guess I'm just curious, what was your take on the story overall? Specific, I guess the big picture question that I would love to get your take on is, as the end of this Byrne-era, like, was it a satisfying finale?
I think it was meant to be. I think that was the plan. Ultimately, we're 2 years in. So we're 2 years in. We're 72 books of Superman. So I guess in a sense, if we only had one Superman book a month, the long game would be we're not going to see Zod for 6 years. But they're going, you know what? We've done quite a bit. Let's bring them back. I guess I'll contradict myself, and I can appreciate the Zod storyline because it brings in that like other universe side of things, right? And then, is Superman justified killing Zod and them? When you go from what was it, 5 billion? I think he said, or something like that. It's kind of the same thing, and I'll go back to Camp Desiato for a second, and Henry Cavill Superman probably should have killed Zod because Zod says, "I'm going to kill every person on this planet," so he's going, well, that's it. I think it was a good end cap. I personally don't like the Supergirl side of it, though. I don't know why. I know that like without the Supergirl side of things, it's not the same. I feel they could have used her differently. I guess my argument still is wait on Supergirl and maybe just do the Zod storyline. Maybe do the Kryptonian storyline, but don't do Supergirl. I think it cheapens it. I don't know why it feels that way because she's not really Kryptonian. I think it makes it a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, she's this protoplasm that, takes on the,
Right.
the identity of Supergirl and eventually develops her own personality. And then, Peter David did a ton with her in that
Yeah.
series, but it, and I think for what it was, like, it was very interesting and different, but it's like, yeah, so very far removed from
Yeah.
the traditional take. I definitely think you could have done this story without Supergirl, to your point. I think you could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know for me now, and having now read all of Byrne's Superman Action and Adventures, yeah, I don't know how well the Supergirl saga necessarily functions as an end cap to this period, because it doesn't.
No.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying like, oh, I expect everything to be wrapped up. Obviously not. Obviously, this is an ongoing adventure. I'm not, no pun intended.
Right.
But just in terms of like what Byrne had established and was working with, like, I don't know that it necessarily, because the Pocket Universe came up in that Legion story that we skipped over that I'll go back to on the podcast in the future. But, mostly dealt with this Pocket Universe that was, again, removed from our world. And, Superman's Kryptonian heritage was such a tiny part of this run by design.
Yeah.
So it just, I don't know. It didn't really feel like thematically, it didn't feel like we were getting any kind of full circle moment or anything like that. It felt more like an outlier than a finale to me.
I actually probably would have enjoyed this as the first story arc of the next chapter.
Yeah.
Like, I think if somebody took this over, start here and make it like a big boom, like kick the door down. We got a new creator and artist. Like, but yeah, like I totally agree with you, because obviously we're not going to wrap up anything. The character's been around for 80 years, but you've done now 2 full years, 72 issues almost. And how does John Byrne say goodbye to some people, almost, in a way? How do we see what's the next step for those characters? And they're really removed from the equation for 3 full issues. So I think to the answer to your question, I don't think it's an end cap. I mean, I'm not sure it was meant to be. I'm not even sure. I think it was a story he wanted to tell as his last story, So maybe not think it was an end cap, but maybe just, hey, I'm going to be done. I'm going on different things, but I really wanted to tell this story. So who knows?
Well, and building off of that, I mean, I don't know all of the behind the scenes at DC at the time, but, Dan Greenfield was speaking about how there seemed to be some, some tension between Byrne and editorial as he was So, to your point, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Perhaps this was not how he intended to end, and it just sort of ended up being the end. I don't know. But yeah, again, in any event, it was the ending we got, whether it was the one that we needed or deserved, but it was the one that we got. And it's like, it's with Superman bringing this formless protoplasm to the Kents. He's just like, bye.
Yeah. Hey guys, it was like I found this dog in the street. You guys want to take care of it for me while I have to go save the rest of whatever like I'm doing as Superman. Who takes over? Is this when Jurgens takes over?
Yeah, I believe so. I think, and I haven't, so this will be covered in the next episode, but I haven't gotten there yet. But I think Roger Stern is on Superman and Jurgens is on Adventures or something. I think Roger Stern and Dan Jurgens now are in the mix. And
they go back and forth.
And Action, goes weekly, and Superman is not in the spotlight for an extended period. So it's mainly Superman and Adventures. And yeah, I think it's Jurgens and Ordway and Stern who were the primary forces at the time. So that'll be my next project.
Yeah, oh wow. Now are you going from 89 to Death, or what are you doing? 89 to like Time and Time Again? What are you doing?
Through Death and Return.
Whoa. Who did you snag to read 5 years of comics with you?
I have. So for the next 3 episodes, I'm going to be joined by returning guest Scott Honig, who he was on a while back for one of the Jeff Loeb, Joe Kelly episodes. And, he's been a champ with this big project. And so he'll be joining me for the next 3. And then I have the different guests coming up for Death and Funeral, and then Reign and Return. But, the whole first year of the podcast really for me has been building to this, because I wanted to close this big gap in my Superman fandom comics wise. And so far it's been a lot of fun. I'm really excited to see what comes next. I know that, the killing of Zod and the others, kicks off this exile storyline where Superman is racked with guilt over what he's done. And I think, and I read pieces of that when I was a kid, but I'm looking forward to going through the whole thing. And, I to their credit, and whether this was Byrne intended this or not, but obviously the subsequent, teams picked up on it, to really explore the ramifications. We can talk about whether he was justified or not in executing them, but regardless, to get some mileage out of that and to really mine the effect on the psychology and his emotion, I think that's really cool. So I'm looking forward to that very much.
You've got the fact, first of all, I'm excited for you. Because I'll be honest, you do have great reading ahead of you. Have you dug in as much yet? How far are you in?
No, I haven't started. Literally, I finished what we just talked about now.
I did it today.
That's what I just read today. But you know what? I don't like to read too far ahead or watch too far ahead. I like it to be nice and fresh. I like to have it up there, like I'm the Flash in Zack Snyder's Justice League, holding that charge. I hold that charge, and then it comes out in the episode, and we're good to go.
Oh, you're killing me, dude. So you've got Dark Knight over Metropolis coming. You've got Exile. Let's see, Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite.
Yes.
And then that takes us right into Time and Time Again, Panic of the Sky, and then you're dead. Yeah. So, it's a lot of good stuff. It's a lot of good read. Actually, I'm so excited for you. You never read it yet. I'm so excited.
Yeah. I can't wait. Is there anything else that you want to say about the Adventures run before we sign off?
Oh, let me take one last quick look. I really did enjoy Superman is, I guess, how do we pronounce it? Kurok? So it's like fake Iraq.
Your guess is as good as mine, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of dug how he pulled a little bit of a Superman 4. And he's like, no, this is garbage. You will not bring terrorism this far. And he just goes in and just destroys armies, destroys their military, and says, no, we're starting over. They don't like that. I really enjoyed that. We see Checkmate created, which was pretty cool in this run, which is now, if you look at everything leading into our Suicide Squad movie coming out with that whole kind of universe, that's where we started that here too. Gosh, I'm trying to think what else. This era, I think, before we finish, is really important because John Byrne takes a page out of a little of the Bronze Age we talked about with Kryptonite Nevermore, and he does start the short story arc again. That led us into the dreaded triangles in the corners of the issues that everybody is like, wait, gosh, why is it going? Wait, Superman is 1, then 4, then 7, then 11. And I loved all the series that we just are talking about coming up before 1994 and beyond, actually, the 2000s. I love the story arc approach. It wasn't great from a consumer because now you're buying, 4 books a month, but this is where a lot of that started. Okay, I promise. Last thing. Adventures also gives us, and I'll even give you guys an issue if you want to find it on your own. Wait for it. It's Adventures 440. Okay. This is an awesome interaction with Batman. This is Superman and Batman owning up their identities, and it's basically Batman calling out Clark because Clark gives him a scrapbook to look into he wants him to be a detective, and then the greatest thing is Batman goes, the only thing I get to deduce is you're Clark Kent. And then, first of all, Superman goes, I probably should have given that to the world's second greatest detective. And then he says, all right, see you later, Bruce. And then Batman's like, whoa, what? And then he goes, I guess all that work I did on lead lining my cowl didn't really do a lot. So I just love that interaction. Batman hasn't gone to full shitty towards Superman. There's still a little bit of looseness. There's a line too where he says, I don't fully get, I guess your humor eludes me, because he said oh, it must be a school night. Robin's not joining you tonight or something like that. I love that interaction. I thought it was great writing, and I thought it was fun to see them interact in kind of a weird way. And it's the first time you really see in this run all the way through that Superman knows who Batman is and vice versa.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I had forgotten about that, but I'm glad you brought it up because that is a key moment in their history and in this run. That was a really, really fun scene. I'm glad you brought that up. All right, is there anything else before we sign off?
No, man, thanks so much for having me. I love doing these with you. It's great.
Right on. Thank you very much. My thanks once again to Bernie for joining me to discuss those two runs. We'll be back in 1 week with part 3 of Crisis Till Death. Next week, we're taking a little bit of a break from comic book talk, and we'll be taking a look at what was going on in Superman animation during this period of time. Specifically, we are going to be taking a deep dive into the 1988 Ruby Spears Superman cartoon, the often overlooked, some might say forgotten, 1988 Ruby Spears cartoon. You might recall that I did a mini episode of Digging for Kryptonite with Rich Roney about that cartoon months and months ago. That was a relatively short discussion where we mostly just talked about how surprised we were that the show existed and we had never known about it. But for this next episode, I'm going to be joined by returning guest Jeremy Frutkin. Jeremy's done a couple of episodes, including the Post-Crisis Origins installment. So Jeremy will be back, and he and I are watching the entire 13-episode run of the cartoon and talking about the series as a whole. Again, it's somewhat of an overlooked entry in the Superman canon, but it deserves its place and it deserves to be discussed, and it fits in perfectly right in this period of time that we're talking about here. So you really don't want to miss this one. Part 3 of Crisis Till Death in 1 week, taking a look at the 1988 Ruby Spears cartoon. So I hope to see you then, and until then, remember, it's about what you do, it's about action. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production, art by Greg Schiegel, music by Basic Printer. Join the conversation by becoming part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group. Follow Digging for Kryptonite on Instagram and Twitter, and visit flatsquirrelproductions.com to explore more of my film and podcast projects.